Welcome to the Tim Booker Book Sharing channel. Like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our updates. Let's explore the world of books together.
Today's book for you is The Empire of Things, a monumental work detailing the history of human consumer culture spanning over 5 centuries. Selected as the Book of the Year by The Times in 2016 and honored with the Austrian Annual Science Book Award in 2018, this book truly left a profound impact on me upon encountering it. How to describe it? Firstly, its appearance resembles the weighty tomes we used to read, akin to the large dictionaries and the Oxford English Dictionary. With a substantial 896 pages, this volume might dissuade some. Yet, often, the larger the tome, the clearer its structure, the author periodically revisits the theme of their work. This book speaks of history, but fundamentally aims to convey relationships. These relationships refer to the reciprocal influence between consumption and human society. Thus, the book threads 2 narratives, one delving into how various institutions and ideologies in human society shape consumption, and the other revealing how consumption, in turn, reshapes the power, structure, and value systems of our society. It might sound abstract, but fear not, there's a key within the book. Upon opening it, you'll encounter a short poem titled Ode to Things, encapsulating the essence of the book within these 18 lines. This poem vividly portrays our relationship with things, emphasizing how even seemingly mundane objects like pliers, cups, or bowls, although ordinary, have woven intimate connections with us, enriching our lives while also wearying them. Why celebrate things when materialism often bears a negative connotation? This unveils the book's argument beyond mere history, revealing the author's biased perspective. Essentially, this book aims to redefine our relationship with things, altering the inherent perceptions of consumption, encouraging reflection on the positive role of consumption in societal progress and our daily lives. There's a line from the Book of Changes, I Ching, that aptly describes this book: the people daily use it but do not understand it. The items we use daily remain largely misunderstood. While consumption seems inconspicuous, it has always been at the core of significant human milestones. Shadows of consumption loom behind globalization, urbanization, and democratization. As conscientious consumers, each of us who jokes about shopping sprees is, in fact, participating in humanity's great historical journey through buying. To reclaim the cultural significance of human materialism and reshape our view of consumption, the author, with a grand ambition, spent 7 years crafting this monumental work, an epic endeavor with over 100 pages dedicated solely to annotations. What sets this book apart today is its global perspective, not confined solely to Western society. It spans 6 continents, a rare comparative study that connects countries across Asia, Africa, and Latin America. It can also be seen as a historical narrative of global integration from the vantage point of consumption. Having explored the book's characteristics, let's delve into the author, Frank Trentmann. Born in Germany, he taught at Princeton University in the United States and Bielefeld University in Germany. Presently, he serves as a history professor at the University of London and a professor at the Manchester Institute for Sustainable Consumption. The genesis of this magnum opus stemmed from Frank's leadership of a colossal project, the Consumer Culture Research Program, funded with a staggering £5 million. This project united over 60 experts from diverse fields spanning from fashion and geography to law and commerce. Their aim was interdisciplinary, aiming to comprehensively unveil consumption's unique role in human politics, economics, and cultural life. The resulting comprehensive work not only demonstrates meticulous academic rigor but also exhibits eloquence in its prose. Next, let's delve into the book's specific contents. I'll guide you through 2 perspectives. Firstly, examining history through contemporary life, how consumption has shaped our present society. Secondly, viewing contemporary life through historical lenses, using history to ponder the issues within today's consumer culture. Part 1 is great. Let's dive into the first perspective, examining history through contemporary life. Consumption, it's not unfamiliar to us, perhaps even too familiar, as we live in a world enveloped by commodities. What's unfamiliar is how these items have entered our lives. You might jest, saying, isn't it what we buy? Indeed, but what this book aims to convey is, people's choices depend on how these choices are created. Our daily meals, clothing, each has undergone a massive revolution in lifestyle, often being part of the global political and economic system, entering ordinary households through the baptism of globalization. In the author's view, consumption is a pivotal concept in social history, yet we still know very little about it. To understand the consumption referred to in this book, it's best to connect it to Baudrillard's The Consumer Society. In a consumer society, consumption is not just an economic stage, it's a social construct. It shapes our identities, tastes, and lives. Essentially, who we are and how we live are often shaped by how we consume. Many centuries ago, markets, purchases, and choices were far from being as widespread or suppressed as they are today. But over the past few centuries, consumption has become a typical feature of people's lives. The meaning of the word consumption has wonderfully evolved through this history. Initially representing expenditure, depletion, or even tuberculosis in Western vocabulary in the 12th century, it gradually shifted to denote positive, creative elements after the 17th century. A pivotal milestone was Adam Smith's assertion in The Wealth of Nations that consumption is the sole end and purpose of all production activities. Economists of the 19th century even proposed that value is created by consumption, not labor. As the consumer society took shape in the 20th century, the term consumption disconnected from its meaning of exhaustion. During this time, people didn't buy new things because their clothes wore out or their cars broke down. They purchased them as expressions of taste or symbols of affluence. From material consumption to symbolic consumption, consumption transitioned from the realm of economics to the domain of sociological research. Centered on the societal significance of consumption, the author delves into over 5 centuries of history, resurrecting the origins of global consumption culture from diverse historical records, thrusting the often overlooked crucial roles onto the historical stage. In the book, I've summarized 4 transformations to help you understand better. Let's start with the first transformation, the globalization driven by consumption. This is a chapter vividly portrayed in the book's historical narrative. The author suggests that one of humanity's most commendable achievements from the 16th to the 19th century was connecting distant continents into a single global market for commodities. In essence, consumption had become a genuine international phenomenon by then. In the 16th century, during the late Ming dynasty in China, not only did the Ming dynasty initiate the maritime Silk Road, but the world also entered the era of great maritime exploration. The opening up of the New World in the Americas, the discovery of new sea routes, these breathtaking endeavors were followed by the globalization of consumption propelled by maritime trade. A plethora of goods poured into previously regional markets. Tea and porcelain flowed from China to both sides of the Pacific, while tobacco, turkey, sweet potatoes, and maize from the Americas found their way into China. Cotton textiles from England and India embarked on their global conquest, marking a momentous history. This global exchange had a significant impact on daily life. Economic transformations were initiated by a single plant. For instance, after the sweet potato arrived from the Americas, it gradually became a staple food for the Chinese, freeing millions of Chinese farmers from cultivation and redirecting their efforts to silk production. Silk, in turn, brought in more goods. Similarly, American maize found its place on dining tables, freeing up more land and hands for tea cultivation and the production of sugarcane crops. Fashion in the cities also underwent a revolution. In the 16th century, Japanese lacquerware, European glassware, and exotic pets became ordinary in Ming Dynasty gentry households. The book provides extensive research on Chinese history, even citing classics like Jin Ping Mei and Dream of the Red Chamber, showcasing the astounding prosperity and sophistication of consumption during the Ming and Qing dynasties. The structural changes in consumption driven by global trade reshaped national economies and altered the trends in people's lives. The Renaissance-era Italy, 17th-century Netherlands, and Britain were also hotspots of global trade, where people were introduced to the enlightenment of globalized consumption. A series of addictive foods from foreign lands conquered Europe. For instance, tea and coffee initially regarded as exotic remedies, sugar considered a luxury for the nobles and commercial elite, eventually entered daily life through fashion emulation. The widespread popularity of these commodities relied on the global production and consumption chains spanning continents. The colonial machinery of empires played a significant role in disseminating new goods, hobbies, and lifestyles. In turn, the global circulation of goods further fortified the commercial foundation of imperial powers. As global trade barriers were successively dismantled through wars and diplomacy, a unified world market began to form. In the 17th century, people in Nigeria began wearing clothes made from Dutch linen. In the 18th century, tools made of imported iron from England appeared in Senegambia. In the 19th century, an advertisement for soap in Africa portrayed a black boy being scrubbed into a pure and progressive white person. Colonies became dumping grounds for cheap European goods, and opium became a hero in the hands of chauvinistic rulers, the exploitation of empires cloaked in commercialization and modernization. As more and more populations worldwide were cultivated as consumers, the era of empires reached its pinnacle. Alright, let's move on to the second point, how consumption facilitated urbanization. Cities are the hub of consumption. All residents consume, be it workers, traders, housewives, or maids. From the 19th to the 20th century, cities not only grew larger but also witnessed increased consumption. In 1800, Paris's nights were illuminated by only a few thousand oil lamps, with most areas shrouded in darkness. By 1914, during the outbreak of World War I, Paris's nights were lit by tens of thousands of gas lamps, a hundredfold increase. Gas, water pipes, electrical wires, buses, and trams emerged one after the other, forming networks that challenged people's existing lifestyle patterns. After the widespread availability of running water, dilemmas arose over whether items like bathtubs and flushing toilets were necessities or luxuries that should enter ordinary households, puzzling many Europeans. On the other side of the Atlantic, young America quickly became a super-consumer of urban water. In 1884, Atlanta's per capita water supply was 10 times that of Berlin, Germany. Wells and water carriers disappeared as piped supply systems became standard in cities. Without easily consumable water resources, supercities supporting tens of millions of people would not have emerged. Thus, it can be said that the infrastructure of daily consumption shaped modern cities, while modern cities continuously spawned more advanced infrastructure. Iconic elements of cities also include shopping and entertainment spaces, evolving into complex systems centered around consumption. 19th-century Paris was hailed as the capital of the world, pioneering the emergence of department stores. The author describes how these stores concentrated various goods and innovations under one enormous glass roof. Department stores became symbols of urban life and engines that initiated and disseminated consumption. I've included an aerial view of Le Bon Marché, the first department store in Paris, in the manuscript for you to experience how a gigantic department store held a position in past societal life. Le Bon Marché and the Eiffel Tower were designed by the same architect. Innovations abounded here. Glass showcases established a new intimate connection between consumers and goods. Discounts and advertisements thrust products into people's minds. Millions of mail-order catalogs were sent to homes both domestically and abroad, bringing marketplaces into each household. In 1894, Le Bon Marché alone shipped parcels worth 40 million francs annually. These various innovations collectively triggered a tsunami of desires and products, sparking a revolution in consumer psychology. The book also specifically mentions Tianxiao in early 20th century Beijing, a pioneer of integrated leisure and entertainment consumption. It wasn't just a place for locals seeking amusement and fun, outsiders viewed it as a tourist attraction, experiencing the authentic urban lifestyle amidst bustling sounds and shouts. The city acted as a colossal vessel of consumption, where department stores, street vendors, cinemas, amusement parks, intersected. And consumption seemed like the twin of the city. It's hard to tell which one made the other grow so magnificently. After discussing urbanization, let's delve into the third point, the popularization of consumption in modernization. Modernization is a broad concept encompassing a series of thoughts and lifestyle shifts from tradition, including elements such as science, efficiency, practicality, feminism, and internationalization. This book allows us to understand that no matter how complex an idea may be, once it integrates into the choices of daily consumption, it becomes tangible and real. In other words, ideas find grounding through consumption. Even a reclusive housewife has experienced the transformation brought by the consumption revolution. Since the 17th and 18th centuries, industrialization accelerated the separation of work from the household, with people going to factories or companies to earn money, while the home space became a typical scene for consumption. By the end of the 19th century, American shopping guides advocated treating the living room as an important medium for life education. For instance, if you aimed to refine the taste of family members, the home's decoration couldn't just be sufficient, it had to be refined. New products, technologies, and cultures rushed ahead of housewives. Soft cushions and sofas brought about a culture of comfort in homes, while the popularity of wallpapers represented emerging trends in decoration. Mass-produced sets of furniture, integrated kitchens, washing machines, vacuum cleaners, and radios standardized households. Before discussions on whether to accept such a plethora of goods could even begin, consumption had already turned modernization into big and small business. Upper middle class, and aristocratic elite families held more business opportunities. They not only modernized but further pursued postmodernity. Eastern pottery was used to match Moorish-style homes, Turkish carpets could create an exotic and nostalgic atmosphere, minimalist Japanese styles catered to the new tastes of European housewives, while high-end tableware from China, Venice, and Tuscany became cultural symbols of family socialization and sophistication. From standardization to personalization, from modern to postmodern, you see, consumption ultimately explained these abstract concepts into everyday life. Lastly, let's discuss the fourth point, the democratization propelled by consumption. In medieval Europe, there were monks dedicated to prayers, knights dedicated to warfare, and serfs dedicated to production. However, in the world of commodities, regardless of people's initial professions or classes, they all eventually shared a common identity: consumers. Class differences between the upper echelons of society and the common masses, between cultural elites and ordinary folks, in some aspects, began to diminish. In the 16th century, silk stockings were considered a symbol of power by the French royalty. After World War I, they were listed as precious assets for men in Soviet Russia, and by the latter half of the 20th century, female factory workers wore them regularly. It's an intriguing phenomenon. While some aimed to create distinctions through consumption, many more converged with trends through consumption. Consumption flattened many differences, especially entering the mass culture era of the 20th century, where the upper middle class sometimes abandoned the maintenance of their tastes, indulging in Shakespearean plays as well as TV soap operas. From the pre-World War II era to the Cold War period, the United States transformed into a typical, consumer society. Not only advertisers and businessmen but even governments began to cater to consumers. You'll notice that in political mobilization, consumption had a particularly down-to-earth and miraculous effect. Whether it was the progressive, New Deal, or totalitarian regimes like Nazism or Stalinism, almost all promised their supporters a better life. During Stalin's era, Soviets believed that all loyal workers would drink champagne, and everyone had the right to own a television. In countries suffering from inflation and economic depression, consumers were no longer seen as the cause of the problem but rather a solution. In 1931, economist Keynes, hailed as the father of post-war prosperity, wrote, "Saving money was a sin during economic downturns. Whenever you save 5 shillings, you make someone unemployed for a day." He urged patriotic housewives to indulge in shopping. People from different parts of the world, upon assuming the new identity of consumers, received special treatment. Consumerism often accompanied democracy, freedom, and capitalism as a cohesive whole. After World War II, American chain supermarkets, marketing advertisements on Madison Avenue, and Hollywood movies spread across the Atlantic and Pacific coasts, leading people from different countries and races to adopt similar shopping and entertainment lifestyles. Consumer culture became a powerful force of standardization worldwide. The second part is great. We've just looked at history through the lens of contemporary life, constantly discovering the potential role of consumption within 4 processes of human society: globalization, urbanization, modernization, and democratization. Next, let's revisit contemporary life through history, using a historical perspective to aid our understanding of the issues within today's consumer culture. From this extensive work, the term affluent society stands out in the author's discourse. It doesn't celebrate material abundance but rather draws attention to a shift from scarcity to affluence, highlighting new spiritual and moral issues arising from this change, as humans aren't inherently adapted to affluence. Overconsumption is a typical symptom of affluenza, and consumer credit is considered the intermediary infecting people with this illness. Commerce, finance, and advertising collude, chanting slogans like, "Buy now, pay later." Previously, living beyond one's means was considered a moral flaw. Today, it's gradually defended as a virtue, seen as wise investment for the future. The author approaches this issue from two perspectives. On one hand, credit indeed fosters a vicious cycle of debt, overconsumption, and false needs, further cementing commerce at the center of power and enslaving people to both consumption and debt. On the other hand, it's portrayed as an escalator, leading people towards the future by borrowing money to ascend. This escalator is a key viewpoint on consumption frequently mentioned in this book. Renowned British economist and pioneer of neoclassical economics, Marshall, likened economic development to climbing an endless ladder. Consumption, according to the author, acts as a growth wheel. More wealth incites higher expectations, eventually sparking more creativity, which in turn brings more wealth, akin to installing an escalator for society. On a personal level, consumption can play the role of an escalator, applied to individual spending, representing societal progress. As illustrated in a book called The Fable of the Bees, respecting individual pursuits of desire ultimately contributes to the overall realization of public interests, a crucial task for modern society. The empire of goods conveys a similar notion. The author asserts that, looking back on the development of consumer credit since the 20th century, evidence proves that most people exercise prudence in handling credit. While some may have had their collateral repossessed, thousands of car and home loans have been consistently repaid on time. These loans help many advance their consumption needs ahead of time, enhancing their ability to further realize their wealth dreams, a metaphorical escalator. Those excluded from legitimate credit mechanisms, in contrast, are akin to being pushed off this escalator apparatus. Alright, let's delve into another issue discussed in this book that troubles people. Does consumption exacerbate anxiety in their lives? Anxiety isn't solely a contemporary issue. As early as 1831, French historian Tocqueville, after traveling to the United States, wrote in Democracy in America, Americans are always in a hurry, eager to grab anything within reach, making one suspect whether they often worry about not living long enough to enjoy these things. In 1874, Nietzsche expressed concerns about an increasingly hectic life and the resulting depletion of people's spiritual world. In 1990, an eye-catching association named the Slow Down Society was established in Austria. What accelerates the pace of people's lives? The author also wonders, is time scarcity truly the cost of pursuing material abundance? The general consensus is, yes, to achieve more consumption desires, people have to revolve around the axis of the world of commodities like they have the hamster syndrome. However, the author moves a step further. It's not that time has actually decreased, rather, our consumption behavior has altered our awareness of time and the way we utilize it. For example, why are we so tired? Isn't leisure meant to relax? Oh no, not only did Veblen in The Theory of the Leisure Class state that leisure also serves as a distinction among social classes. This book's author highlights that we're experiencing a leisure revolution because an affluent society has made leisure time increasingly valuable. Since the Industrial Revolution, people's working hours have significantly reduced compared to their ancestors. When the poor gained holidays, becoming a new leisure class, the rich, in turn, became the working class. As everyone gained leisure time, the gap between those who used to have it and those who didn't was replaced by the differences in what people did during their free time. People worked tirelessly while also striving for efficiency and leisure, essentially fighting on two fronts. The quality of leisure time and the diversity of activities became a new fashion for shaping identity. Our time poverty is largely due to everyone aspiring to be part of the privileged leisure class. Finally, let's address a soul-searching question discussed in this book: has consumerism killed God? This might sound very Western, like a Christian-style question, but in essence, it's a universal query. It asks whether, when materialism becomes a new faith, consumption becomes the enemy of people's pursuit of a sublime spiritual life. For critics, this isn't an exaggeration. People want commodities, not God. When Europe entered an affluent society in the 1960s, people stopped going to church and started going shopping. Pope John Paul II condemned consumerism for turning people into slaves of possessions and immediate gratification. However, this crisis didn't start with affluent society. Nietzsche also said, God is dead. Historically, the progression of human society towards reason and modernity inevitably leads to secularization as part of humanity's self-awakening, liberation from divine authority, and the shift towards human rights. One might say that the demise of tradition is merely a matter of time. In other words, as people become more efficient and modern, consumption is an inevitable outcome. It's not anyone's enemy. So, specifically, does consumption hinder people's pursuit of a more sublime spiritual life? The author leans towards not opposing the two. The author tells us that spiritual culture has always needed material culture as a carrier, and culture has never completely detached from commerce. During the Middle Ages, the Crusades disseminated countless Virgin Mary souvenirs through trade. For instance, in Japan, religious rituals are often linked with purchases. Sculptures of rabbits, birds, cups, and spoons, considered connecting items, are believed to bring good luck when brought home. European anthropologists describe these objects as intermediaries of gods. In simple terms, these are akin to modern-day creative products. In the real world, spiritual life doesn't exist purely in a spiritual form, it's also filled with various materials. For the transmission and revival of past cultural traditions and values in people's present lives, affluence may not only pose a challenge but also an opportunity. Alright, we've reached the end of The Empire of Goods. The book holds many rich sections, delving into how the world of commodities harnesses children and the elderly as a force in consumption, and exploring relationships between people and items from disposal to recycling after their use. You can also purchase the physical book for further reading. Summing up, every commodity in the material world we live in holds a deep historical significance. They don't simply exist, they come before us due to various systems and concepts within human society. Through this book, the author guides us through how an increasing number of commodities entered people's lives and how all of this changed society and history. Therefore, one could say this book portrays a modern history of human civilization from the perspective of commodities. Consumption is actually a pivotal concept in human civilization. It appears inconspicuous, yet it has always been at the core of many significant human developments. Hasty criticism might blind us to its extraordinary historical value. It's within consumption that grand concepts like globalization, urbanization, modernization, and democratization merge with the preferences, trends, and daily lives of people in every era, truly coming to life. Even today, the output of material and cultural commodities continues to stoke the fire of global integration. When young people worldwide share a Coke or visit Starbucks, they're primarily partaking in a communal human experience through consumption. Consumption also intricately weaves the fabric between individuals and society. What and how much we consume is not only a personal issue but one of the most complex problems of our time. Our relationship with objects not only defines our lifestyle but also shapes the forms of economics, society, and power. Material abundance brings about a commodity empire with amplified power. Faced with forthcoming greater abundance, are we prepared across various aspects of societal ethics to welcome it? This book talks about history, cares about society and people, reminiscent of the analytic school in historical studies. Interested readers might want to explore another monumental work written over 20 years by the eminent figure of the French analytic school, Fernand Braudel, Civilization and Capitalism, 15th to 18th century. There are many striking similarities between that book and this one today. The multitude of things that make up our daily life structure, from necessities like clothing, food, shelter, and transportation, whether conspicuous or insignificant, contain the vast and magnificent history of the world. Lastly, I'd like to say, the author's positive view of consumption differs from the critical school. While Baudrillard and Zizek cautioned us about how consumption manipulates people, the author informs us about how society is shaped by consumption. We need a dialectical approach. Consumption is fundamentally a philosophical issue without a definitive good or bad conclusion. As mentioned earlier, this book stemmed from a massive research project, which in a way dictates the author's fundamental inclination to conduct constructive research. Consumption has no original sin, but it has never been devoid of moral content. We can set aside biases and attempt to individually contemplate the ultimate significance of consumption in our personal lives. Alright, today's book interpretation ends here. Congratulations, you've finished another book. Thank you all for your support and attention. Please subscribe to the Tim Booker channel, like, and share this valuable knowledge with friends around you. Let's combine wisdom with practice, achieve our financial goals, and create a better future together. Thank you, goodbye.